And it looks like we are live from the Digital Pedagogy Lab Institute from Fredericksburg, Virginia, USA. And I'm Ken Bauer, your virtual buddy, and I will go to this massive amount of people on site so they can introduce them.
Okay, I'll start back here. I'm Rebecca Hogue. I'm a co-founder, co-director of Virtually Connecting. And yeah, really complicated, but I was in the networks track with a lot of these wonderful people today. And yeah, I'll start with that and pass it along to Miranda.
Oh, I'm Miranda. I'm an animation instructor for high school and also work with the Academic Technologies Department at Keene State College in Keene, New Hampshire. And I was in the networking chat.
Wonderful.
I'm Tim Clark. I'm an instructional technologist. These are my colleagues from Muhlenberg College.
Jenna Azar, instructional design.
Erickson, I'm the library director at Virginia Wesleyan University.
Hi everyone, I'm Lora Taub. I'm from Muhlenberg College and I am in the networks intercultural track.
Wonderful. And why don't we do a quick round on the on-site people? Or do we miss? There's Sunday and Rebecca there as well.
Well, I started. So.
I'm tweeting on the other side, and George is behind me.
George is taking photos.
George,
Yeah, can you just get a photo to tweet us?
Yeah, good.
Wonderful. Pose. Everyone say smile. And we'll do virtual introductions. From my left to right, Akeisha, then Keegan, then Sherry, then Virginia.
Hello, my name is Akeisha Horton, and I am a learning architect and administrative faculty for Air University, E-School of Graduate and Professional Military Education.
All right, and my name is Keegan Longwheeler, and I'm at the University of Oklahoma. I am an educational technologist and work on things like our Domain of One's Own project and different things of that nature.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sherry Spelitz, and I am an elementary physical education specialist. And actually, I got to do the Digital Pedagogy Lab Institute in Vancouver. So I'm incredibly interested to find out what you guys are going to tell us about Fredericksburg.
And where are you, Sherry? Physically?
I'm in Vienna, Austria.
Ah.
Oh, wow. What time is it?
Cool.
Yes.
And I'm Virginia Coleman Prisco. I'm an assistant professor at Mercy College in New York. I focus on using OERs for undergraduate general education and e-portfolios. So that's my focus. And
I am Ken Bauer, associate professor of computing science. It's 11:19 in Austria right now, PM. But this is V Connecting. This is what we do. And I'll be your virtual buddy here, and I really want to know what's going on site as well, so why don't we let you all talk.
You didn't tell us where you work in.
Oh, I'm in Guadalajara, Mexico, but I'm originally from Canada, from Victoria, where I studied together with Rebecca Hogue.
Great. Who wants to go first? It has been quite a day, well, quite 4 days. And they keep reminding us that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and we are feeling that mental fatigue.
Coming to the last few steps.
Coming down the line. So, but today has been rich.
I'm interested maybe to hear from Sherry as well if Vancouver was structured this way, but it seems like this year is a little bit different in that beyond the tracks that we're in and attending each day with our cohorts in our tracks, we've had the opportunity yesterday and today to make some choices about where to spend our time in workshops in the afternoon. So there were about 5 workshops this afternoon and a round of lightning talks. And that has just brought even more voices into the lab experience. And that seems like it's something new, and I'm a big fan. I think it was great.
I'll just say a word. Oh, sorry.
Oh, now you're muted.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay. Unmute. Just to answer your question, I think in our institute was 3 days, so it was much shorter. But we did have those common times, and we had one round of workshops, and the times that we spent together. So even just the meals, having the meals together, allowed for a lot of cross-fertilization. So I'm sure that in your 5-day institute, that's all the more beneficial.
I appreciated in this morning's opening remarks, Chris Friends was saying that day 4 is the day when you are absolutely exhausted, but you are also coming to the realization that this experience is about to end. So tomorrow's our last day, it's just a half day. And so, you know, that feeling of how do we separate after all of this connecting, and that not necessarily wanting to separate, but it's coming. We know it's coming.
One of the questions I have for the on-site folks are, what are some of the conversations that have been going on during your time there? The ones that are your absolute favorites, the ones that get you jazzed and you think you'll take back with you?
I have to give a big shout out to Chris Gilliard, because his workshop on privacy yesterday, I'm gonna take back to my campus with me and talk to my colleagues about it, and hopefully get a lot of people thinking about the questions of what we do to protect and to protect student privacy when we're using digital tools and platforms in our teaching. These are things I feel like on August 28th, I'm going to be putting into practice.
I attended that workshop as well, and I really appreciated that it started out with a general discussion of student privacy, and then we had a very practical exercise that really got us digging into a syllabus as a document that was riddled with moments of being in tension with that privacy.
And I'm in the data track, and a companion to Chris's workshop was when Bill Fitzgerald joined us remotely and walked us through some proxies, intercepting proxies that can sit between educational technology platforms and say your students, and allow folks to be able to audit not just what you see from the user experience, you know, from the graphical interfaces, but what's happening architecturally from the back end in terms of ad tracking or anything that might be serving out student information to a platform. That to me was just really beneficial and fascinating.
Jumping off of that, today we had a conversation in a workshop about digital citizenship, which was, it was fantastic. Everyone got super heated and very upset, and they felt very like, I felt very violated leaving that, like knowing really what these algorithms and stuff are doing and how that information is being shared. And, you know, the term citizenship is so like trivial and controversial. And we've been talking a lot in the networking track too about defining different types of existing in a place. So like, you can be like an alien, you can be like an undocumented citizen, you can be a resident alien, non-resident alien. So these terms like citizen, alien, I mean, they've been really like woven into the conversation here, and it makes for a very heated discussion, but it also brings up a lot of good questions. Like, how do we address an inclusive environment knowing that there's so many different perspectives on citizenship and about place of being and how to be in a place, whether it's online or physically.
That was today.
Yeah. And I think jumping off of that, you know, also then layering in, what does it mean for us to ask students to work in the public space online? And what are issues of consent and permission? And how do we think about, you know, as we think about digital citizenship and we think about students, we tend to assume everyone's entering online spaces on a sort of in a level space, right? Everyone has access to the internet in my classroom, right? But that there are far more considerations around what it means to ask students to work in public, and so we've been doing a lot of work around that in our track as well.
I remember talking with you at Domains, and your son was there to tell us about that as well.
Yes.
Updates on that?
Yeah. And so he was there at Domains, and I think, really valued the opportunity, but certainly I think was at that point feeling the absence of students and student voice. And I'm imagining that Miranda, a year out of school, or not even, is also maybe feeling that, the absence of student voices in this space as well. And maybe a silver lining is some of the work that Tim's been doing in his track was tracking tweets, and they can both tell you more about that. What do you think, Miranda?
Just about, sorry, I spaced out for a minute. My brain's a little shut off.
So at Domains, we were struggling. We were talking about student presence, right? What it means to be centering students in our work, and maybe not having students in the space. And so you've been our resident track.
Yeah. So
pseudo-student voice.
Yeah. I think like the one thing that's really important, like the reason that I got into all of this was because of the open pedagogy class I took, and my student opinion being shared so widely. On a blog post I wrote recapping my experience, and the one beneficial thing that I've had as a student being at these sort of events is that when you are a student, there's a lot of things that happen institutionally in the classroom, et cetera, that don't make sense. And when you're at an institution, you're one of 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, 45,000, however big your school is. And sometimes getting answers to those questions can be almost impossible. And there's usually a lot of hoops you have to jump through. Being at these events makes me understand the teacher perspective a lot better, like why teachers approach certain subjects the way they do. I think a lot of the miscommunications that I had, or the issues I had in class, like looking back, it was just a miscommunication of maybe professors not understanding where we're coming from in our struggle, and then us not understanding the roadblocks on their end of things. So being here has really helped open up my eyes to this whole other world of academia that's like existing at the same time that I'm existing there. Like I'm living there, I'm eating there, I'm going to class there, I'm there 24/7, but there's this whole, the professor side of thing and the staff side of thing that you don't ever get to see in the roadblocks that are there. And so I think if more students were at these events, there would be a lot more open communication, and a lot of roadblocks I think that exist right now just would not exist if there was that more open communication. And being able to relate my experience. We talk a lot about like student debt and about like hungry students and homeless students. And I remember after the last one, I had someone come up to me and say, "Oh, is that true? Like, do you actually know anyone on your campus who's hungry and homeless?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know some girl who used to take the free popcorn from the student center at night every day. She'd wait till they cleaned it out, and she'd take 2 bags, and that would be the only thing she would eat all day. She slept on a mattress pad in the floor of somebody else's apartment." And so then they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's happening at our school?" And I'm like, "Yes, it's happening all the time at our school. Like, I know many people who are like that." So kind of being able to sort of back up these facts from a personal experience and share personal stories, I think is beneficial for professors and staff and whoever else is at the school. It's just a verification that this is a real issue, and that the traditional methods of teaching and institutional guidance don't work. And I have a lot of personal stories of struggle to share to sort of help edge that on.
We've been talking a lot about empathy and read a piece on radical empathy, and in particular empathy in practice. And so one of the things that Kate Bowles and Mahabali had asked us to do at the end of the day was try to sign up for a Mastodon account. Yeah. And if that wasn't empathy in practice, I don't know what was. I am now 2 attempts and 2 different accounts in and still not in Mastodon. And so, also the spaces where we can work together to really understand what are we at, when we're asking students to try these new technologies or try new ways of learning, what are the barriers to entry? And I think that's a kind of empathy that we may not practice as often as we should. So that was, I'm taking that with me this evening for sure.
Sorry for jumping out a sec, but I had a thought while you were speaking there, Miranda, is one thing that's really great about getting students to voice what's going on with them in their own space is we get to see that as faculty. And I think it's really important for students to see what we're doing as well. I get my students to see what we're doing here with Virtually Connecting, and getting that view, I think, is just as important for them as it is for us to see what the students are doing.
Oh, absolutely. I think, like I said, it's a both-way thing. I think both sides would benefit. And I think that, like I said, there'd be a lot of miscommunication that happens. I'm realizing, like, in hindsight, I just graduated in May, so fresh out. A lot of the frustrations, and thank you, a lot of the frustrations and miscommunications that I had were just misunderstandings, not getting the other person's perspective, or what roadblocks, they don't understand my roadblocks, I don't understand their roadblocks, and what they're trying to work around. And and this is like a huge problem, like students not understanding the structure of institutions. I still cannot tell you. I mean, and it's like to the point where now I'm like helping work at Keene State and I still don't understand the institutional structure. And that builds a lot of distrust from the student perspective. So, because everything seems so hidden, and so it's like, oh, like, where's my money going to? Where is the food coming from? Like, it's basic stuff that we just don't have answers for. And so being here and kind of getting that curtain pulled back a little bit, I think will create a lot more trust between students and faculty if we can get more students to these events, because there's a lot, we feel like we're lied to a lot. Like, that's like a common feeling among me and my friends is that, we're lied to, that everyone's just working for the system, that we're being screwed over. There's a kind of hopeless feeling a lot of the times.
No, and wonderful. That's an awesome, important perspective for us to receive. Jump in online, people. You're all veterans at this. Come on, jump in, Keegan and Akeisha.
Okay, well, I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Or if Keegan has one.
Go for it.
Well, Keegan asked, like, what sort of is one of your big takeaways that you're leaving with. I always like to find out sort of what makes people uncomfortable, because that's what makes change happen, is when you are confronted with something really uncomfortable. If anyone is willing to talk about that, have you been confronted? I know Sarah spoke, I've seen her speak before, and it's mind-blowing. And Miranda, were just speaking about having homeless students on campus and dealing with the financial limitations that are around. So has there been anything that you've been confronted with that is making you uncomfortable?
Yesterday in the network track, I think it was yesterday, it's a blur. we were talking about the visitor resident model, which has, sort of taken over and maybe finally done away with, and we're all grateful for this, right? The digital native immigrant paradigm. But I think there was a lot of discomfort with even still the notion of visitors and residents. Mm-hmm. And as we explored that and explored other ways of imagining, other metaphors for giving some organization or meaning to the way we are in the spaces we are online, resident and visitor still is really fraught. And it's fraught actually for a lot of the same reasons immigrant and native is. And I think we didn't come up with any way to solve that problem. I think by the end, we sort of exploded the axis and decided that that isn't helpful. There was a young child in the classroom with us who had actually been doing some drawing on the whiteboard, and it was some scribbles and spirals, and that was sort of happening in the corner of the whiteboard while the axis was in the center. And I think Kate Bowles really astutely remarked that we're better served with that scrawling, spiraling, axis-free drawing than we are this. So I was really glad that we took up for probably 2 full hours the discomfort around a model which is supposed to replace a problematic other model.
Right, because we like to sort of put learning and everything in boxes and give it some shape and space, but it probably doesn't really have any.
And I think people were wanting especially to hold on to the fluidity of the ways that we are online. So for example, with Mastodon, I wouldn't even know where to put Mastodon on any of those axes because my experience has been kind of fluid and shifting, and there's no way to sort of pin that down on any axis point. So other discomforts?
I think we had some really rich conversations around literacies and the different ways that people make meaning, and that that we're so accustomed to creating space in our classes, in our minds, in our lives for text literacies, for the written text, and what are some of the complications of making space for other kinds of literacies? The visual in particular was some of what we were talking about today. How do we, where does the person who thinks and understands and connects with the world in other ways than text, also consider the ways that visual and other kinds of ways of sharing your learning or your work impact other people as well. And so we were shifting within that tension too, that when we ask students or ourselves, for example, to use photos, videos, digital stories, film as a way of shaping their own learning, who else is on the other side of that? Who else is on the line? Who are in those photos? Who's being represented? And that was, I think a shift for many of us.
Mm-hmm. And I have something and I just lost it. Oh, I hate that.
It just happened to me 2 seconds.
I know.
I just cut it off.
You had something, Keegan.
So one of the things that I experienced today was in a consultation I had with a faculty member who he's a poli-sci, he wants to integrate things like podcasting into his course. And the way that our conversation started off this time was actually really interesting because he was talking about, what do I do nowadays in terms of having students post these types of content online? Is it something that's public, or is it something that's anonymous, or is it private? Or so we had a very interesting conversation about the nature of what the students are creating multimedia wise in his course in particular. But I wonder how prevalent, how primed some instructors may be towards those conversations now with the things that have transpired and over the last year and what that all means. So I guess I offer that up because I'm curious, especially speaking from the hearing the students' perspective on that, if as an educational technologist, as someone who works with faculty members, if there are any thoughts about, you know, is this the time for certain ideas to take up arms, or I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Chris Gilliard said one really thing that is going to stay with me. He said many things that are going to stay with a lot of us. But yesterday in his workshop, one of the things he said that is a guiding principle, he wrote it on the board: don't ask students to use technology that they don't have control over their data. Don't ask students to use online technology where they lose control over their privacy, over their data. That rules out a whole lot of ed tech, doesn't it?
I think it's hard. I think, like, and I don't know if this is all of my generation or students, or if this is just me, but we're kind of like desensitized to it. Like, I don't have a fear of stuff being stolen because that's already happened to me. You know, my first Facebook was I've had to make a whole new Facebook 3 times because when I was younger and using it and have all the security settings up, everything got hacked, I had my picture put on a profile picture on a dating site that wasn't me, like totally catfish. So there's kind of like, we just know that by putting stuff on the internet, it's probably gonna go everywhere. And like, I've had my social security number compromised, I've had my credit cards hacked. I mean, but this is not just me, this is my friends. Like, I've had friends who have had the same problems. And so I think, like, yes, it would be nice to like use sites that, you know, have like a certain amount of control over data and sharing, but really those programs are very far and few between. If you want to make any progress or do certain things, you have to use programs that don't have that option because it doesn't make money for the company to have those advanced security settings. And we're just kind of used to like the mentality that anything we put out there is probably going to get stolen or hacked or you know, we can protect it to the best of our ability, but there's really nothing that we can do. I mean, Snapchat gets hacked all the time. It's just like one of those things that I'm very unsensitive, you know, I don't worry about it because it's just probably going to happen, and I'm very desensitized with like the fear of losing. I have like a folder of all of my original stuff, like I'm a photographer, and so all the photographs I put online, I have all the original like 35mm strips or whatever it is, all my original prints, because I have like this assumption that my photographs are going to get stolen, and I am going to have to prove that they are actually mine. So I always keep a bin of this is originals. And same thing for documents. I have, you know, backed up hard drives of all of my originals, just because there's like that assumption like that it's at some point going to get stolen or misused. So I've taken a personal precaution, and you can definitely advise faculty to advise their students to do that as well. It's always good to have backup hard drives and some kind of proof that it originated from you and your computer and your laptop. But I don't know, it's not like a concern for me. I just like, it's like a given. It's just society that I've grown up in.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't ask students to use digital tools where students do not have control of their data, how do you prepare them to interact responsibly with such tools in careers in which they may be expected to be fluent in those tools?
I can't, it's such a great question that you're asking, Akeisha, and I can't pretend to answer for Chris, who takes this position, but I do think he would say it is part of enacting a kind of responsibility to help students develop a more critical awareness about the ways in which their privacy, the ways in which they lose privacy online. So I think he sees that within an ethic of responsibility. Others.
I think it actually reminds me of something that Bonnie Stewart had actually told my class at one point, and about the issues that happened because teachers were prevented from being on Facebook with students. Especially in the younger settings. What that meant was teachers were not allowed to be in the social media spaces, which then led to a lot more severe bullying because there was no supervision. But it's not just supervision, there were also no role models. And so we took the role models out of the digital spaces in order to make sure that spaces were quote unquote safe for younger children. We removed the role models, and without those role models, we don't have, the kids don't learn. They don't have a way in which to learn what appropriate behaviors are, what inappropriate, you know, and sort of that sort of guidelines. And so in some ways, it's sort of like the, you know, throwing the kids out for recess and not having monitors out there. And we've gone and done that in the digital spaces that we send our, especially younger children to.
I think what was really helpful for me learning how to use like tools appropriately, like WordPress and stuff like that, was that my professor made it a point that like there was a couple of times where she would do this 3 or 4 times throughout the semester. She would actually go onto your blog and make a screencast and go all through your blog and point out which links weren't working and then give a suggestion of how to fix that. For a while, you'd click on my homepage and it'd bring you to my About Me because I'd messed up a setting. So, you know, she'd just go through and she'd point out spelling errors, layout errors, and then, you know, any other things that needed to be tweaked, maybe like be mindful of this, maybe you shouldn't put this on here, maybe you should put more of this on here. Make sure to get a Creative Commons license for your site. I see you haven't done that yet. And then also provided all the tools necessary for us to make those changes and explained what those changes are and why they're important and what kind of effect it could have if we, not, you know, at 22, I'm not mandated to take anybody's advice by any means. And so just like as an adult, I had to make the choice, okay, do I want to take those photos? It was suggested to me to take the photo down. I was given a reason. Now, do I want to? And then after that point, it becomes, you know, my responsibility. And as an adult, I mean, that's like life. Like you're going to make choices and the responsibility is going to fall on you no matter what, whether you know, you wouldn't run yourself over with a lawnmower. Like it's kind of the same thing. Like, you know how to use a lawnmower, you know how the tool works, you know that you can misuse it. And if you choose to, that's a choice you make. And all logical reason has been given why you should not run yourself over with a lawnmower, but people do it, right? And then there's a consequence to pay for that. And I think it's kind of the same thing where you can just, there's only a certain extent where you have to remember, like, okay, I am teaching or instructing adults, and they know like right from wrong, and then they have the ability to make choices for themselves, and they understand consequences. So you can like go in and explain the tools and say how to appropriately use them and explain when it is an inappropriate use and why it's not appropriate. But ultimately that choice is going to be up to them. That's going to be a life thing.
I agree that you do have to make, you as an instructor, you have to be fluent in the dangers that your students face and make sure you completely inform them in those dangers that they are facing, and also have a justification pedagogically as well as technologically as to why you are requiring them to use their tools and how it supports the content that you're trying to deliver. If that tool is the one that gives them the best learning experience,
yes,
it offers the best solution for teaching, the most efficient method for teaching, then you do have a justification for asking them to use those tools if you can justify all of those areas. However, I think it might be considered irresponsible to deny them that access simply because it's dangerous, as you just said, because there are dangers outside of the digital world that they face from not being informed of their choices when they enter certain scenarios. And so what can we do to minimize or eliminate, if possible, those dangers and be responsible as teachers, as opposed to just saying, let's just reject any tools where they don't have control? Because the truth is, in life, there's a lot of things they're not going to have control of. What they do have control of is their choices and how to best inform themselves and how to protect themselves when they're making those choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree very, very much. And I think another major takeaway from Chris's excellent presentations over the last few days around this notion of extraction and surveillance capitalism is the degree to which this isn't a kind of, oh, we're new at this and we're trying to figure things out, right? This is a situation where things are very intentionally designed, and there is a logic that often has precedent in systems and structures that predate technological solutionism, right? And to be aware that there are deliberate forces that need to be revealed and explained to students as part of that choice making. I guess this is an answer to Virginia's question as well. That made me uncomfortable, and it reminded me of a whole different kind of responsibility that I feel now after having been here.
I think I'm lingering with the, you know, and we hear this a lot. You're certainly not the first student that has said, I don't care about, I don't, you know, I mean, I'm accustomed to these, I understand these risks, they happen to me. I don't feel a sense of agency around them any longer. And so I'm not going to give it another thought. I'm going to protect myself in these other ways, and I'm going to move on. You know, and I struggle with that because I do wonder, you know, is it our responsibility to help our students get uncomfortable with the fact that this has become a sort of accepted risk of being online, and if we help students get uncomfortable with that, does it matter, right? Yeah. And so I guess I'm wondering. I guess that's something I'm throwing out to everybody, because I do feel a responsibility to say, but we need to get, I think, a little, like, I don't know that we want to say our students accept that, and so that's okay, right?
So it's like you go to an airport and the security line takes a really long time because they've had to increase security at airports since 9/11, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, it's sort of the same thing where that's what we've grown up with for our whole lives. And so we've just like accepted that that's the way it is. And it's just, so you can bring it up and you can talk about it and you can explain the reasoning behind it, and you can, is there something? Okay. And you can like explain, like bring up, like, you should feel uncomfortable over the fact that the TSA is, you know, like strip searching everybody when they go through, but it's not going to change it. You know, so by bringing it up and making it like an uncomfortable thing, or like a questioning things, like, okay, like you're right, like we shouldn't be strip searched every time we have to go through airport security, and people shouldn't be targeted by TSA, and there shouldn't be all of these regulations, but it's not going to change. Mm-hmm. And so by bringing it up and talking about it, it might build a level of frustration for a moment of time, and then it just goes back to the way it is. Mm-hmm. Because I don't foresee that going away or getting better anytime soon. You know, online trolling is just like an increasing thing, and so I mean, like, you can. I think it might be a waste of time because it's just what we've grown up with our whole lives.
I wonder if we're having this age-old conversation of the older generation wanting to protect the younger generation, and the younger generation saying, we don't need it. Yeah. And it sounds to like that's what I'm hearing here, is that same dialogue that, you know, we had with our parents, and our parents had with their parents, and it's just.
I just want to add one thing. I hear two things. I don't think they're the same thing. I think something that Chris is talking more about, and I might be wrong, and you were at that, I missed that one, but is the transactional data thing that's going on, that to get something online, you give up some of your data. And some of these, one of the reasons why we don't want students signing up for a lot of these, especially ed tech companies that are free, is because that data is being sold. And that's a totally different thing. We can be aware of it. What we do about that thing, I think, is different than what we do about our pictures being stolen or our identity being stolen.
But I guess it's like, for me, it's like all the data on my phone is being sold. Like, I don't know. And maybe it's just because I'm just desensitized to the thing at all, that I'm not understanding exactly what it is you're talking about. But like, for me, it doesn't bother me that my data is being sold, because it's like a normal thing that we're just like told happens, and we know it happens.
And I'm very uncomfortable trying to speak on behalf of Chris, so I won't, but I do feel pretty confident in saying that we should not normalize this.
No,
we should not normalize surveillance capitalism and extraction, and that the conditions for any possibility of changing it are understanding how these systems Tim was speaking of and Cindy is speaking of, how these systems work. And so we've definitely been able to, across many conversations, workshops, and tracks, think very deeply about the structures of digital learning and online learning that include surveillance capitalism and extraction, and how all of that squares with our hopes as educators and learners for humane, equitable spaces in which the work and play of learning can happen.
So what do we have in creating those spaces ourselves? We talked about this a little bit a couple of days ago, of if we are dependent upon corporations to create the spaces that we expect to use in our educational environments, then it will become normalized. So what role do you see educators have in creating such spaces, or, you know, finding ways to produce those spaces in online environments?
Well, one of the really cool tracks here is the domains track, where they're looking at domain of one's own as a model for reclaiming ownership over the online space that we occupy. So I'd throw that out there as one of the examples that's really being considered closely here.
Although I would trouble that one a little bit because it's not an inexpensive solution, and it's actually not necessarily an affordable solution for a lot of people, both financially but also technologically. So I don't know that there's an easy answer. Or well, I know there isn't an easy answer. I think it's really is. I think there's so many complex nuances, and I think there's many answers in different ways. And I think domains is one of them. It's just that I don't like when it's presented as an answer without it being troubled in and of itself.
Right, and we've had these discussions about who owns when it's domains of one own. My students might trust our university providing that service for them less than going out and using a commercial service. So there's all sorts of unpacking. We've had these discussions in the domains community as well.
And I'm starting to be mindful of our time.
Yes, me too.
I'm going to have to wrap up here.
Any closing from that side on the on-site that you want to add before you go? I know Sean and Jesse talked about how day 4 is the oh my God, it's almost over. We gotta get it all in before we leave, and what are we gonna do when we get back home type thing, which Sherry's gone through from the Vancouver event.
Yeah, and I think my biggest concern is how are we going to continue the conversations, and how are we going to stay connected? Because we've had physical presence as a way to connect, but we don't also pass around business cards anymore and Twitter, like, it's funny. So like, how are we going to stay connected going forward? And it, you know, so I'll invite people to keep an eye on virtually connecting, because we are one way in which people can.
Yes, thank you, Barry. All right, well, if that's it, I guess I'll let everyone go. Thank you very much, Rebecca and Sunday, for hosting. Miranda, Tim, Jenna, Sue, and Laura. Sorry, Sue, for leaving you out on that link. But thank you so much for your time. And this was a wonderful conversation. And thank you for everyone who's virtually here as well.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
It was nice to meet you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. We're still recording if you want to add some extra post-show comments. I definitely want to unwrap that with Chris, because there's all sorts of ways of interpreting those words.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's obviously more to that.
There's context that we've
right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot with the user's perspective and someone who has to implement.
Right.
There's different responsibility measures that are part of the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, I noted in the side chat here, what does ask mean? Is ask saying I'm obliging you to do it? Am I requesting and it's an optional thing? Or I'm suggesting it's something we could research together and talk about it? There's a whole bunch of things to unpack there. But it's interesting. I think we definitely need to talk with our students about the implications of using these different tools.
Right. My students are always amazed that I use my real name online anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, you use your real name? I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, it's me. And I don't put anything out there under me that I wouldn't be okay with showing. I don't have to use a fake name on Snapchat or Twitter. You know, it is who I am. They like to feel anonymous and use funky, weird names and not be known, because for them, that's protecting themselves.
Right.
Exactly. But then I tell them that's good that you do that, because when you have to be professional and have a professional online persona, you should be professional.
Right. All the crazy stuff I did in the 80s aren't recorded.
Right. Luckily, you know, our pagers didn't have cameras.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a different environment.
Yeah.
What about you, Keisha?
All right.
Sherry should go. You're tired. It's late.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I realize it's midnight for me, so I'm going to check out.
It was wonderful to see you, Sherry.
To see everybody. Take care.
A lot.
Bye.
Anything last to add, Keegan or Keisha, before I stop the recording?
It was just very interesting conversations that you're having, and in a way, at least I can't speak for everyone else, but I appreciate being able to participate, but I also feel a bit of a disconnect because I'm not entrenched in the conversations they're having that accumulated in those ideas that you know that are being embraced.
Yeah, we think, speaking kind of for the virtually connecting community, but I can't. But there's so much that VC brings for us that aren't on site, but we can't replace that. I mean, we weren't in the room listening to Chris Killier give his talk, and there's so much context lost. We had the chance to talk with Chris on another session earlier this week, but yeah. I love what we do with virtually connecting. I think this is incredible to get us into this community.
It's very valuable.
Sometimes it's like you feel worse because you're like tasting it, but you can't have the whole thing.
And I will say, following up with that, I do appreciate the resources that are shared under each track. I've had a chance to go through a few of them, and those are some very rich resources that you have there. Yeah, and I don't know if any more are being shared that could be put up, but that was very valuable to me.
Yeah, definitely reach out, Keisha, to the people that are sharing those articles and resources. And if you don't have that contact, ask us, and we can definitely track them down. And I'll pass on those thoughts to Sean and Jesse for sure. Thanks, Keegan.
It's been a lot of fun this week. I'm glad that so many VC sessions have been going on, just because although it's hard to substitute the face-to-face, it is fun and interesting to see like what is resonating with folks. And I think that's where, like, even though we're not getting the foundation, so we don't have quite the understanding of how they're arriving at the place they're arriving, kind of being at least glimpsing the direction folks are thinking and heading, I think has been very, very awesome this week to see.
You've been pretty active, so you might be feeling like I felt during domains when I wasn't there. Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm going to hit the stop broadcast button and close out. Thank you for everyone joining us here at the DPLI Fredericksburg. Thursday, tomorrow's the last day. It's half day, but we still have sessions tomorrow if you want to check out the page at virtuallyconnecting.org.